Let's go to London and speak to Greg Swenson, an analyst of American politics. Greg, welcome to the program. I mean, apart from the salacious elements of how they're going to discuss Donald Trump grabbing women in certain parts of their body, the issue of jury selection, how do you find an American citizen who doesn't have a strong view about Donald Trump?
No, it's a great point, Adnan. I think it's going to be difficult, and especially in a place like New York City, that's where the jury pool, 88% of the jury pool voted for Biden, and probably more than just voting for Biden. There are pretty rabid anti-Trumpers in Manhattan. I think if this trial was a few miles away in Staten Island, it would be a completely different outcome. But I think you have a good point, Adnan. It will be difficult to find a jury in New York that doesn't have some real bias.
Does any of this make any difference to people who vote for him? I mean, this is the first of 4 criminal trials. Will any of them make any difference?
It's a great question. I think some of them could make a difference if there's a conviction. And I think, right now, the majority of voters view this as, lawfare and the weaponization of the justice system. But on the other hand, if there's convictions that might change some minds, especially amongst independents, but even some Republicans have said to pollsters that if there's a conviction, they'll be less likely to vote for President Trump. So, but I think he's lucky that the first trial of the 4 is the Alvin Bragg case, because this is by far the weakest indictment and has very little legal credibility. And so it's a real stretch. So I think in some ways this could help him that this trial is first, because it'll make people more skeptical of the subsequent trials.
How much do you think the future of Donald Trump, the businessman, is dependent on him becoming president again?
I'm not sure about that, Adnan. I think, in many respects, the business, runs on its own. If anything, being president was a distraction. So I'm not sure there's a real correlation there. And I'm not sure that the president wouldn't be better off if he was just focused on his business, if you want to just look at him, from a purely a business or economic standpoint.
Yeah, I suppose actually what I'm talking really about, Greg, and I should have been clearer, was really his reputation as a person of standing in American society, because he can pardon himself if he's found guilty here, but he can't pardon himself in the Georgia election case. Is that correct?
Right.
Because surely that case would be the thing that affects Donald Trump's reputation more than anything if he's found guilty of a criminal offense and he becomes president and can therefore pardon himself.
Yeah, he can pardon himself on some federal crimes. So, again, I think there's some of the other cases, probably the documents case is the one that's got the most credibility. If you look at it, in the letter of the law, I think that one is more likely to have convictions than this one. Now, there might be a conviction in New York because of the jury pool, because it's very hostile to President Trump, but it will be overturned on appeal. Whereas the documents case, if it's viewed strictly on the case and the merits, you could argue that's the one where he has the most risk. Now, if you look at it in the context of the failure to prosecute President Biden for very similar crimes, then it's more of an argument, and I think people can point to the hypocrisy or perhaps the unequal justice that's being applied. But if you looked at it strictly on its own, that's the one with the most risk. And again, that's why I think the president was lucky that this trial is coming first.
Why do you think, Greg, President Biden hasn't really talked about any of this? When he's asked questions, he doesn't like to go there.
I think that's probably wise of President Biden, because, one of the accusations from the Trump camp, and I think there's merit to it, is that, this truly is an effort by the Democrats to prosecute and perhaps imprison a political opponent. It doesn't really show very well. It doesn't look good. And this, again, remember, is coming on the heels of attempts to use the courts to remove President Trump from ballots in several states, employing the FBI and the CIA to censor information, to censor the press, both social media and mainstream media, with regards to, for example, the Hunter Biden laptop back in October of 2020, the Russia collusion hoax. Biden's team kept political opponents off the Democratic primary ballots in North Carolina and Florida. You've got, executive orders to forgive student loans, which is unconstitutional and goes around the Congress. So there's kind of a long list. So I think President Biden is wise, and you saw that yesterday with his press secretary. I think he's wise to stay out of the fray and sort of stay above it.
Greg, really appreciate the time. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank
Look
you,
forward to
Adnan.
the next one.